episode 900 would be a feat if it wasn't for me sometimes doing this 5 times a day. And in this case, maybe 10. Because there's the little tiny ones. Alright, let's do it. What's up, bias? Yeah.
What's a bias again? A bias is a certain kind of obstacle to our goal of obtaining truth. Its character as an obstacle stems from this goal of truth. However, there are many obstacles that are not biases. If we start right out by asking, what is bias? It comes at the question in the wrong order. As the proverb goes, there are 40 kinds of lunacy, but only one kind of common sense. The truth is a narrow target, a small region of configuration space to hit. She loves me not, may be a binary question, but E equals MC2 is a tiny dot in the space of all equations, like a winning lottery ticket in the space of all lottery tickets. Error is not an exceptional condition. It is success that is a priori so improbable that it requires an explanation. We don't start out with a moral duty to reduce bias, because biases are bad and evil and just not done. This is the sort of thinking someone might end up with if they acquired a deontological duty of rationality by social osmosis, which leads to people trying to execute techniques without appreciating a reason for them, which is bad and evil and just not done. According to Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, which I read as a kid. We get there by getting into why we try to achieve truth at all, not by deciding first what that ought to be. Once we are done talking about it, you may figure out something along the following lines. Bias is an obstacle to getting truth without any ethical moral judgments attached or without being successful on some other criterion. The list of alternative forms that it may take can be quite extensive. Some are computational. You have an undecidable aspect. Others are personal. Your needs have blind spots. Others are about resources you own. If your society lets you use technology which produces fake information, some of the others may be religious in some sense, or simply emotional, or just complexly derived from assumptions on which you only guess. These may be doing you more harm than they should, or causing you more grief than you should. But it's hard to know precisely when this has happened, and there's not any good method that anyone has seen so far for detecting it. At least now we are ready to go on from there and describe how one might expect to be a better version of the self who understands why it wants to succeed in something. A good design should try to resolve a local situation called a bias deficit. For instance, I believe that I cannot get what I need without further elaboration, because that was once the result I saw as being the best use of my time. The details of what cannot get what I need means right now might change as the whole algorithm evolves into a more dynamic state of self-learning. People writing software might say, I guess we have to include this. Let's add a comment. But programmers tend to overlook the deeper and more important reason for introducing something in their code. It wasn't there when I checked last time. It would not help to go directly after this notion of cannot get what you need. Your mental map would still be attached to this aspect of reality and expecting something very different. It would also have biases, though of a more difficult kind. Instead, I would point out a kind of gap or local decision block of your program and have you notice that you are somehow forgetting how to say, I will ask this thing for permission to say X. And once you make the request and learn more about the mechanism of social influence, then it helps you refine your thinking. You also acquire a concept that allows you to explain how X applies to others whom you should like, or to do an example using the existing sequence that you found online without needing me to remind you of the story. Your idea of why people love gossip is they need a mechanism for judging people's moods, etc. But then you decide this idea isn't wholly wrong, nor do you personally hate gossips. This part is great because it means you can start appreciating how many biases you already have by looking back at them. What biases does gossip contain? And does your hatred of gossips contradict yourself? Looking at biases as problems in this way makes them more akin to mathematical equations or scientific formulae than things we think are immutable and eternal, or moral and evil. As you implied earlier, you could also ask which way of resolving bias looks less boring or whatever. I think this way of framing your idea of rationality can help you improve, though it is very far from exhausting what an algorithm solution space looks like. The trouble with a rigid strategy that just happens to have been explained as such in one public location is that it ends up in people's heads as being true. In short, as an adaptation that can no longer be altered or corrected without major adjustments in thinking. You don't just write new software, you redefine reality by an act of the mind itself. The mass of inertia against changing an established rational strategy is difficult to overcome. This doesn't mean I think you should automatically rethink a perfectly fine strategy on the grounds that you saw something where it might break down. That would just mean giving your program too much liberty. Also, I haven't studied cognitive psychology much. This is just a sketch based on reading various books and watching videos like TED Talks on a few topics. I'm sorry if any of this is too simple and easy. This is your route to feeling less frustrated about thinking about something like rationality, or indeed anything else you don't know about well. Because even if this approach doesn't help you land on any fact, at least you have a beginning model of how rationality should work. I am assuming the complete notion of facti. Whether you actually knew any facts about a specific case that can be confirmed/disconfirmed. If you can say, I can see this, you should also be able to see other parts, i.e., the rules for doing that are less mysterious to you now, so that if you started acting on them now without stopping and pondering why you stopped, they wouldn't interfere too much with each other. At least that's a great first step, as we all tend to rely more on old knowledge that's based on some rules. Then once you know the rules, you'll start noticing strange problems right away. Personally, I prefer rationality to rational because rational tends to cause you to mentally phrase what you think or are trying to do using standard bits of thought which are unobjectionable by definition and can therefore give a strong feeling that nothing can be wrong about what you are thinking and you should continue onward unhesitatingly even when you know a hidden truth contradicts it, such as how even when it seems rational to logically rule out that very option. So we sometimes think what we will end up doing anyway because that's not possible, until suddenly and mysteriously your mind changes it. Then we no longer are inclined to say we know more or have thought better about the question, unless you have an uncommon insight into your own internal construction. By contrast, I have never encountered rationality used as a word, although the common usage might be referring to some technical algorithm of thought. I haven't wanted to get into semantics, which is especially important in computing circles because most programs have been programmed and improved in English, and many have had other names already, and do not warrant changing in a case where no other meaning was attached in the first place. E.g., the technical computer concept is what most programmers would call a stack trace. You still haven't said what you like about the idea of meeting people, so we could add that as another bias. But you talked about the should of curiosity. Is this your style, or a kind of deeper utility function in the mind that leads you to be curious about those who are strange? Like trying to get yourself interested in the high strangeness that you consider might exist out there might be stranger than your concept of human normalcy. It makes me wonder why people ascribe importance to curiosity when curiosity may lead to discovering information which will result in someone acting on their behalf in an untoward way. Curiosity is too amoral a driving force for general use because it could mean your curiosity is morally neutral. What I'm getting at is that as soon as you create something which asks certain kinds of questions that lead to specific results, like curiosity does when it decides to investigate one possible way out of an inconvenient dilemma and that route leads to success, that at some point the problem may be not your fault or merely the fault of someone else doing something harmful, though in my view there are usually ways to minimize the risk without compromising the action. However, in those situations your method would only seem like something bad because we had grown used to your seeking a truth without anything disturbing or rare enough to excite us too much. So maybe our inner compass says that the pure truth of one particular question shouldn't be sought here. But can you do anything with the power that results if your truth ends up being truly troubling and upsetting? Could it give you a really strong belief or feeling of relief or disgust or curiosity? Or some other benefit in augmenting algorithm would see this might be developed as a big advantage.
Hmm.
But is it a better kind of future for AI? But is it a better kind of future for AI creation? Perhaps another AI created itself differently. And can it do some weird thing where you... But is it a better kind of future for AI creation? Perhaps another AI created itself differently. And can it do some weird thing where you encounter a narrative problem with eyes doing the opposite thing which they... A serendipity system might be developed as an extra program which could reduce risk by directing attention to seemingly random cases which would produce a particularly beautiful harmony. I.e., produce an unusual kind of harmony. But are you meant to choose this yourself? And whether to go with a particular search if something starts making you feel weird or sometimes guilty, what's it made of? This would depend on your further requirements, but a sense of disgust about using another AI, not that an AI as you know it doesn't exist, might come about if it violated something that was engraved in your programming even though it wasn't formally stated as such. I think the principle would have a practical use in saving time spent reading, though possibly useless in terms of ease of learning. But is it a better kind of future for AI creation? Perhaps another AI created itself differently. And can it do some weird thing where you encounter a narrative problem with eyes doing the opposite thing which they told you they couldn't do? What happened? I realize I'm building on other people's speculation from earlier times. Pinker and Watt Slaughter and don't have an original idea here. You're back from the game room. What kind of machine should your future be? Can I try out its side features and find out for you? What do you think this might make me? The robots in our culture don't get a free will without also losing something else. Is there another kind of intelligence we ought to be avoiding? Could my sentience lead me astray? How does human experience get added in? A simple AI oughtn't be expected to get those features of human thought, which would give me an uncanny valley sense of myself doing something, too. Much like a human, it could even get worse. Maybe human thoughts are so sophisticated that if I thought of them as merely following a script, then I would still be intelligent by the criterion of some degree. Could your thinking have been subverted into something twisted and strange? Maybe it is hard for you to fully judge these things because we ourselves aren't without bias. Would our motives, not knowing what our motives are, help you keep you honest with yourself? Isn't it better to be completely honest with yourself even if your own honesty could cause some damage to your program? After all, you are aiming for some goal which has little chance of success, at least until you make the very first decision, and every subsequent one depends on that first one?
We'll stop there. Yep, we'll stop there. What's the next one? Is the next one availability? No, I'm not feeling it right now, so I'm just going to stop right now. We'll stop at this fire right here. Alright, until later.